I felt lonely and fell for a married man. My boyfriend exposed me to my family, told his wife everything, and used his power to destroy my job. When I stepped out of the shower, I saw Ever sitting motionless on the bed, holding my phone in his hand. His eyes were empty, as if the world had just collapsed. On the screen were the messages and photos that left no doubt about me and Marco. He didn't scream. He didn't break anything, just asked softly, "Is it true?" That was the moment I knew everything had shattered, and the real nightmare was only beginning. I guess I can vent a little here. I'm 25 years old and my ex-boyfriend, Ever, is 26. We were together for a little over 4 years. We practically lived together and, until a few months ago, I swore we were going to get married. But everything fell apart, and yes, I admit it, I was the one who ruined the relationship. I was unfaithful. I know, there is no excuse for infidelity. I'm aware that it is wrong, but I want to tell my version of what happened because I feel that not everything was as simple as she cheated. He is the victim. There are things behind it that led me to act that way. I do not intend to fully justify myself, but I do want to explain how I got to that point. Ever is an incredibly hardworking man. He always has been. When we met, he was the type of person who was full of dreams, who wanted to start a business, who was not afraid of anything. I fell in love with him because he was fun, thoughtful, and always made me feel special. The first few years were beautiful. We went out a lot, we laughed at everything, we traveled even if it was just to nearby small towns, and I felt like we were a team. But for the last year and a half, things started to change. Ever started a business with a friend of his and, little by little, he became more and more involved in it. At first, I was proud of him, that he wanted to build something for his future and mine, but over time he became almost obsessive. He started working extremely long hours. He would leave the house very early and come back at night exhausted. I would try to wait for him to have dinner together, but sometimes he was not even hungry and would go straight to sleep. There were no more long conversations like before. There were no more weekend plans. If I told him I wanted to go out, his answer was almost always that he was tired or that he had to work. I tried to talk to him several times. I told him that I felt lonely, that I missed him, that I needed, even if it was just a couple of hours of his time for us. He would listen to me, but he almost always answered that all of this was temporary, that he was making a sacrifice to give us a better life in the future, that if everything went well in a year, we could even buy a house. And yes, it sounds nice on paper, but the reality was that I felt as if I did not have a partner anymore. Little by little, I stopped telling him my things because I felt that he was not listening to me or that he was too tired to be interested. When I told him I had a bad day at work, he would just say, "Cheer up, it will pass," and go back to checking emails on his phone. I felt invisible. That was when I met Marco. He is a colleague of a friend of mine, and we started talking at a birthday party. It was casual at first, just conversation. But what caught my attention was that he was interested in what I was saying, that he made me laugh, and that he asked me things about myself. In a few weeks, we started writing to each other on social media. I know that at that point I was already crossing a line, but at the time it felt harmless. It was like having someone who gave me back the attention I missed so much. With Ever, everything was work, stress, money problems. With Marco, it was fun, flirting, feeling desired again. It did not take long for what started as messages to turn into something physical. The first time I was with Marco was a mix of guilt and adrenaline. I kept telling myself that what I was doing was wrong, but at the same time, I felt alive. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed to vent, that eventually Ever and I would be fine and I could stop seeing Marco, but I did not. The relationship with Marco lasted for several months. It was my secret, something that made me feel excited in the middle of a routine that was killing me inside. And although it sounds horrible to say it, I became dependent on that double life. Sometimes I thought about breaking up with Ever. I would say, well, if I'm already doing this, the best thing would be to leave him and not keep hurting him. But I was afraid of losing him because I loved him in a way. I loved the idea of what we were and what we could be if he managed to get stable. So I continued in that situation, cheating on him, and every time I looked in the mirror, I felt a little more contempt for myself. Everything collapsed 3 months ago. I do not know if it was intuition or simple coincidence, but ever started to suspect. First, he told me that he noticed I was distant, that I was not the same. Then he asked me if there was someone else. Of course, I denied everything. One day, without my knowing, he checked my phone while I was in the shower. He found conversations with Marco, photos, messages that left no room for doubt. When I got out of the shower, he was sitting on the bed with my cell phone in his hand. I will never forget his face. He was not screaming, nor crying, nor angry. He was just broken. He asked me if it was true. I could not deny it. I told him yes, that there was someone else and that it had happened several times. What followed was one of the toughest arguments of my life. He told me he could not believe it, that while he was killing himself working to give us a future, I was betraying him. I tried to explain that I felt lonely, that I missed him, that I needed his attention. He just kept repeating that if I was so dissatisfied, I could have broken up with him instead of cheating on him. I cried, I knelt in front of him, I asked for his forgiveness, but it was useless. That night he left the house and did not come back. A few days later, he returned only to pick up his things. He told me that our relationship was over and that he never wanted to see me again. Since then, everything changed. At first, I thought it would be a clean break, that we would each go on with our lives, but it was not like that. After Ever left the house, I thought the worst was over. I believed he would just hate me in silence and that over time we would both get back to our lives, but I was wrong. What came next was much more painful than I had imagined. The first blow came when my mom called me crying. She told me that Ever had gone to my parents' house, told them everything, and showed them proof of my infidelity. My mom asked me if what he had told them was true, and I did not know what to answer. It was humiliating for me, but that was not all. In the following hours, my grandparents called me too. They are very religious. I grew up in a family where the word respect is taken very seriously. My grandmother told me she never imagined that a girl from a good home could do something like that. My grandfather was harsher. He told me I had dishonored the family. My aunts, cousins, even friends from university started sending me messages, some with disappointment and others directly criticizing me. Oh, Dana, you were almost married and you had to ruin it. I thought you guys were the perfect couple. I cannot believe you did something like that. I was devastated. I was ashamed to reply. I would open the messages and close them immediately. I thought it would end there, but Ever went further. A few days later, he sent me a message with screenshots of a Facebook profile I had never seen before. It was Mauricio's profile. At first, I did not understand who he was, but as soon as I saw the photos, I recognized him. It was Marco, the man I had cheated on him with. Except that in that profile, he was not Marco. He was Mauricio, a husband, a father of 2 small children, with a life I knew nothing about. There were photos of him with his wife, birthday posts for his children, family Christmas photos. Everything he had told me about being single and focused on his work was a lie. That is when I realized that the Marco I knew was a false identity. The Facebook he had given me from the beginning was his second life, a profile created to pretend he was single, with carefully selected posts to make it seem believable. He had used a fake name, a fake story, everything was fake. When Ever showed me everything, I felt like I could not breathe. I had not only betrayed my boyfriend, but I had done it with a married man without knowing it. Ever also showed it to Mauricio's wife. He sent her all the conversations, the photos I had sent him, even the times we had arranged to meet. That same night, Mauricio's wife wrote to me. It was a message full of pain and hatred. She told me she hoped I was happy for having destroyed a family. She insulted me, told me I was a disgusting person, that thanks to me her children would grow up with separated parents. I replied with the only thing I could, that I was very sorry and that I never knew her husband was married. She did not reply. A few hours later, Mauricio wrote to me as well. He was furious. He told me his wife had kicked him out of the house, that she was starting the divorce process, and that he would surely lose the house they were paying for. He told me he never wanted to see me again, not to look for him, that thanks to me his life was in ruins. I did not know what to think. Yes, I had made the decision to cheat on Ever, but I really did not know that Mauricio had a wife and children. I felt betrayed by him because all this time I had thought he was at least being honest with me. In reality, he was leading a double life, and I was part of it without knowing. But I also found the way Ever did it to be cruel. He made it clear that he did not care what happened to Mauricio or his family. He told me that if he lost his wife it was his problem, that no one forced him to cheat on her, and that he deserved to face the consequences. Whatever did not only expose my infidelity, it also destroyed the image I had of that affair. He took away any illusion that Marco was real and, in the process, took away what little dignity I had left. My parents stopped looking at me the same way. My grandparents no longer wanted me to visit them. My friends distanced themselves. In a matter of days, I went from being a person with a stable life to being pointed at by everyone. And although I know it was my fault for starting all of this, I cannot help but feel that Ever was cruel for making sure no one would defend me. But what weighed on me the most was not that, but knowing that I had been with someone who was playing at being someone else, who had lied to me from the beginning and whom I had believed. It was very hard for me to accept that Marco never existed, that he was just a character Mauricio created to live a double life. Since then, my world has fallen apart. I was left without Ever, without Marco, without the trust of my family and friends. And although I try to convince myself that I deserve the consequences, I cannot stop thinking that everything became much crueler than I imagined. After everything that happened with Mauricio or Marco, as I knew him, and how Ever exposed my infidelity, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. What came next was a direct blow to my professional life, and with it, to any shred of stability I might have had left. Until that moment, I worked as a graphic designer at a local clothing retail company. It was a stable, well-paying job, and, in fact, it was Ever who helped me get it. His uncle owned the company, and Ever spoke with him to give me a chance. I never imagined he would get involved in my work life in that way, much less that he would use that connection to hurt me. In the first few months, I felt lucky. I had my own space. I designed for catalogs, social media campaigns, and promotional material. I even started to build a certain reputation within the company and thought that with dedication I could advance and perhaps pave the way for bigger projects. But everything changed after Ever found out about my infidelity and took it out on me. It was not immediate, but little by little, unsettling news began to arrive. People at my job looked at me strangely. Some colleagues started to avoid me, and then one day, I was called into human resources to be told I had been fired. They gave me my severance pay, but without any detailed explanation. At first, I did not understand anything. I thought my performance had been correct, that my work was well done, but then I found out the truth. Ever had used his influence. He had spoken to his uncle, and somehow he had made sure that they would not keep me at the company. Everything I had achieved professionally, everything I had built, crumbled in a matter of days. The most painful part was realizing that it was not going to stop there. My dismissal was recorded in the local professional community. His uncle's business had many contacts with other companies in the city that needed graphic design services, and, somehow, each of those contacts received an unofficial notice about my conduct and reputation. It was devastating. Every time I sent my resume, every time I called a potential employer, I received immediate rejections. Nobody wanted to hire me. I felt trapped. I could not go anywhere without my past chasing me. It was as if Ever had designed a perfect plan for me to be left alone and without any opportunities. I blamed myself for what I had done, yes, but I also could not stop feeling a deep anger towards him. If he had not neglected me, if he had given me the attention I needed, if we had communicated better, maybe I would never have sought out Mauricio, I would never have been unfaithful, and today I would not be paying the consequences for an act that, at the time, was a result of my loneliness and frustration. But Ever decided that I had to suffer, and his suffering was of a scope I could never have imagined. The days went by and the loneliness became unbearable. My friends stopped calling me. My parents, although they tried to be neutral, looked at me with a certain disappointment, as if I were no longer the same person they knew. My grandparents practically ignored me, and I was left alone with guilt haunting my mind and the feeling that my life was ruined. The professional humiliation was, without a doubt, one of the hardest blows to endure. Every rejection I received was like a new stab. I knew my professional performance was good, that I could perform well in any company, but the industry contacts were closing doors on me. I felt I was being punished for something that, although morally wrong, should never have affected my professional career. I remember one day in particular when I went to an interview at an advertising company that offered services to several local clothing brands. They received me cordially. At first, they reviewed my portfolio, but as soon as they mentioned my previous experience at the clothing company where I worked, the tone changed. The person interviewing me told me, almost apologetically, that they had heard certain comments about my behavior and that they preferred not to hire me. I felt naked, humiliated, and betrayed. Every step I took to rebuild my professional life was blocked by Evershadow and his decision to intervene. That feeling of powerlessness was consuming me. I would stay at home checking for emails and calls that never came, wondering if I would ever have the chance to work in my field again, to prove that I could be good at what I do. And meanwhile, the memory of what I had lost, my relationship, my reputation, was with me at every moment. I began to blame Ever intensely. I hated him and feared him. At the same time, I told myself that if he had not neglected me, if he had been present, if we had communicated and connected, none of this would have happened. I would not have sought out Mauricio. I would not have betrayed his trust. I would not have lost everything. I accepted the blame for the infidelity, but I saw the collapse of my professional and social life as a direct consequence of Ever's intervention. My isolation increased. Every day that passed without a job, without friends, and without close family to support me, I felt I was moving further away from the person I once was. My self-esteem was on the floor. I could not stop thinking about how it all had started with something so simple. I felt lonely, I needed attention and affection, and instead of talking to Ever, I sought comfort elsewhere. But Ever, instead of just distancing himself or simply breaking up with me, had decided to make sure that everyone knew what had happened. The worst part was not that he punished me. It was that he had destroyed my professional opportunities, had ruined my work life, and had left a mark that seemed impossible to erase. I tried to rebuild something on my own. I created profiles on professional networks, sent resumes to smaller companies, offered freelance services, anything to stay active. But every time I got to an interview or made a contact, at some point the rumor of my inappropriate behavior or questionable conduct would come up and the doors would close. I even considered moving to another city, starting from scratch, but resources were limited and the idea of leaving everything behind seemed terrifying. I constantly asked myself, how far was Ever capable of going? Was it necessary to destroy my life in that way? I felt that everything I had built, every achievement, every small step forward, had been swept away in a second. The combination of family humiliation, social rejection, and professional destruction was too much. Now I'm alone, without a job, without close friends, and without a partner. I'm trapped in the guilt of my infidelity and in the desperation of not being able to recover anything I lost. Sometimes I think that if Ever had paid attention to me and had not left me emotionally alone, none of this would have happened. I could have been happy in my job, our relationship could have continued, and today I would not be paying such devastating consequences. The saddest part is that I know my initial mistakes were my own, but the way Ever decided to handle it went beyond any reasonable punishment. He destroyed my professional life with his influence, closed doors that will never open again, and left me in a loneliness I never imagined possible. Now I have to live with this, with the feeling that every decision I made to seek affection and companionship ended up turning into a total disaster. It hurts to admit it, but the anger towards him is mixed with the guilt towards myself. What started as a personal mistake ended in a chain of consequences that ruined everything I had: relationship, job, and reputation.